child stands next to her mother in 1910. 100 years later, experts realize the woman was never there. Eleanor Wright adjusted her glasses as she examined the photograph from an anonymous donation to the Boston Historical Museum. The 1910 portrait showed a girl of about 7 standing beside a woman who appeared to be her mother. The wooden frame was cracked at the corners, the photograph yellowed with time. A simple note read, "Belonged to Rose. Someone should know her story." "There's something strange about this photograph," Eleanor murmured to her colleague Marcus, who peered over her shoulder. The child's serious eyes seemed to follow her movements, but it was the woman's figure that intrigued her. Something seemed slightly off in a nearly imperceptible way. In the conservation laboratory, Eleanor scanned the image in high resolution. That night in her apartment, as summer rain tapped against the window, she examined the digitized photograph on her computer screen. Subtle details became evident: the inconsistent lighting, the woman's shadow falling at a slightly different angle than the child's, an almost imperceptible line of demarcation around the maternal figure. "Impossible," she whispered, leaning closer. "In 1910? This can't be right." The next morning, Eleanor hurried back to the museum with renewed purpose. This wasn't just another historical artifact. It was a mystery spanning a century. Who was Rose? Why would someone create such a sophisticated photographic manipulation in an era when such techniques were rudimentary at best? And who had anonymously delivered this piece of history to the museum? As she placed the photograph carefully back in its protective sleeve, Eleanor felt a connection to the solemn-faced girl. Behind those dark eyes lay a story waiting to be uncovered, a story someone wanted remembered. The Photographic Analysis Laboratory at Massachusetts University was quiet that Wednesday morning. Professor Howard Jenkins, a renowned expert in historical photography with disheveled gray hair and glasses perpetually sliding down his nose, examined the enlarged image on the high-definition screen. "Fascinating," he murmured, adjusting contrast parameters and magnifying certain details. "See these almost imperceptible edges around the woman's figure, and the image density, subtly different from the girl's. The granulation, too." Eleanor felt a shiver run down her spine. The suspicions that had kept her awake for 2 consecutive nights seemed to be confirmed. "So I'm right? It's a manipulation?" "Yes, undoubtedly," Jenkins confirmed, leaning back in his chair. "But it's extraordinarily well done for the period. Someone with exceptional skill combined 2 different photographs using negative overlay techniques and manual retouching far advanced for their time. Such techniques existed in 1910, certainly, but were rare and usually quite obvious." Eleanor's mind raced in several directions simultaneously. Who would do this? And why? "That," smiled Jenkins with a curious gleam in his tired eyes, "is your mystery to solve, not mine." Back at the museum, Eleanor began her research with renewed enthusiasm. The only concrete clue she possessed was the name Rose in the accompanying note. In Massachusetts immigration records between 1900 and 1910, she found dozens of girls with that name: Italian, Irish, Jewish, German immigrants, all arriving in Boston with their families. Then she discovered an article in a digitized 1909 newspaper about a photography studio in Boston's predominantly Italian North End neighborhood, run by an immigrant named Antonio Bellini, who advertised, "Specialist in artistic photographic montages. We preserve memories of distant or deceased loved ones." North End had changed dramatically in a century. Old brick buildings now housed modern cafes with free Wi-Fi, designer boutiques, and expensive apartments overlooking the harbor, though still maintaining unmistakable traces of their Italian heritage. Eleanor walked slowly down Hanover Street, consulting an old city map she had printed at the museum. "Should be here," she murmured, stopping in front of what was now an elegant clothing store with mirrored windows. A discreet bronze plaque on the side wall read, "Formerly Bellini Photographic Studio, 1905 to 1928, Boston Historical Landmark." Inside, an elderly woman with perfectly white hair was methodically arranging colorful dresses. "Can I help you?" she asked with a slight Italian accent still perceptible. "I'm doing historical research on the photography studio that once operated here," Eleanor explained, showing her museum identification. The woman immediately broke into a warm smile. "Oh, old Bellini's place. My grandmother talked about him often. I'm Maria Conti. Would you know if any records, equipment, or photographs from that time might still exist somewhere? Perhaps in the basement," Maria replied thoughtfully. "My parents bought this building from Bellini's daughter in the 60s. We've never disturbed much down there." Minutes later, Maria guided Eleanor down a narrow wooden staircase. The basement smelled of mildew and forgotten stories. Maria pointed to an old dark wood trunk against the stone wall. "That was here when my parents bought the place. We always knew it was from the old studio, but never felt right opening it." With slightly trembling hands, Eleanor knelt before the trunk. Inside were dozens of glass photographic plates, old negatives in small hand-labeled boxes, and a thick red leather-bound book, a registry documenting every photograph taken in the studio, with a crucial entry from June 15, 1910. Rose DiMatteo, age 7. Special portrait with deceased mother's image, at father's request. No charge. Work done as an act of charity. In St. Leonard's Church archives, Eleanor quickly found the record she was seeking. The 1910 obituary book listed Maria DiMatteo, age 29, died January 27, 1910, from pneumonia complications during a prolonged winter epidemic. She left behind husband Giuseppe DiMatteo, a shoemaker, and daughter Rose, age 7. 3 days after the funeral, Giuseppe came to my studio. Eleanor read aloud from Antonio Bellini's handwritten memoirs found in the trunk. He brought his little daughter and a damaged photograph of his wife, their only portrait of her. Little Rose couldn't stop crying, saying she was beginning to forget what her mother's face looked like. The man begged me with tears in his eyes, "Make it look like they're together, so Rose will have something to keep, something to hold when she misses her." How could I refuse such a request? I, who had also lost my mother as a child in Italy. Eleanor felt tears forming in her own eyes as she imagined the scene from a century ago, the desperate father trying to console his daughter, the grieving child clinging to fading memories, the compassionate photographer accepting a technically impossible challenge for his time. In her apartment that evening, Eleanor spread her discoveries across her kitchen table. Census records showed Giuseppe DiMatteo working as a shoemaker in a small North End shop. A 1915 local newspaper article mentioned Rose DiMatteo, then 12, winning a school writing contest with an essay about life in two lands. The last record Eleanor found was a marriage certificate dated August 1923. Rose DiMatteo, 20, marrying Michael Kelly, 23, a Boston public school teacher, an Italian-Irish marriage relatively uncommon for the time. Returning to the original box containing the framed photograph, Eleanor found another item she had previously overlooked, a small fabric-covered diary. On the first page, a single line in hesitant, childish handwriting, "To remember Mama, even if only in dreams and photographs. Rose, 1912. Rose's diary was small, with a worn leather cover and thin pages covered in childish handwriting that gradually transformed and matured over the years. Eleanor read carefully by her bedside lamp, feeling simultaneously like an intruder into a girl's most intimate thoughts and a guardian responsible for preserving a story that needed to be told. June 20th, 1910. Dear Diary, Papa gave me a photograph today. It's me and Mama together, as if she never left. I know it's magic because Mama is in heaven now, but in the picture she's with me, her hand on my shoulder like when she would fix me up for church. Mr. Bellini is a magician who captures souls on paper. That's what Sophia from the bakery says. Papa says it's so I remember Mama is always with me, even when I can't see her. I put the photograph next to my bed so she can watch me sleep every night. The entries continued, documenting daily life in North End, the challenges of being an Italian immigrant's daughter, Giuseppe's long working hours, frequent visits to Bellini's studio, where Rose sometimes helped on Sundays after Mass. April 15th, 1917. Everyone's talking about the war. Papa is worried about cousins still in Italy. Mr. Bellini says he might not get photographic materials from Europe anymore. Today I looked at my special photograph again. After all these years, I sometimes forget Mama wasn't really there when it was taken. It looks so real. It's strange how something I know isn't true can bring me so much comfort. In 1918, Rose's writing revealed new tragedy. October 28, 1918. Papa died today. The Spanish flu took him like so many others these past weeks. The doctor didn't even come. They're all overwhelmed. Mrs. Ginelli from next door held my hand while he took his last breath. I'm alone now. Mr. and Mrs. Bellini came for me. They say I can stay with their family. I took only some clothes and my special photograph. As I packed it, I realized I'm now an orphan, but in the photograph, I still have my mother with me. The final entry was dated August 14, 1923. Tomorrow I marry Michael. He's kind and good. Last night I brought my photograph when he formally proposed. I needed Mama and Papa there somehow. Michael understood without explanation. He promised our first daughter will have her name, Maria. The morning was exceptionally clear and cool after a night of rain as Eleanor drove to Quincy, a suburb south of Boston. Following meticulously collected clues from public records, newspaper obituaries, and old telephone directories, she had discovered that Rose and Michael Kelly had moved to Quincy in the early 1930s. School records showed their daughter, Maria Kelly, born December 1925, had attended Quincy High School, graduating in 1943. From there, the trail became more difficult to follow. Fragmented documents, gaps in digitized records, the partial invisibility of women in official records when they married and changed surnames. Quincy Municipal Cemetery was quiet except for occasional birdsong. Eleanor walked methodically between headstones until finding what she sought in the older section. Rose Kelly, née DiMatteo, 1903-1978. Beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. Memory is the treasure of the heart. She lived a long life, thought Eleanor, placing a small bouquet of flowers. 75 years. I hope it was a happy one. Beside her lay Michael Kelly, who died in 1982, dedicated teacher and loving father. At Quincy's community center, Eleanor met an elderly gray-haired volunteer named Betty Thompson, who was cataloging old photographs for a local history project. Maria Kelly, said Betty, adjusting her glasses while mentally flipping through her memories. Of course I knew her. She was my teacher at Adams Street Elementary in the 60s. A wonderful woman, always with stories about old Boston and immigrant life. Would you know if she's still alive? Eleanor asked. Betty sadly shook her head. Passed away about 5 years ago. But her daughter, Anne Reynolds is her married name, still lives here in Quincy. She's been running the municipal library for nearly 20 years. Eleanor felt her heart quicken. A great-granddaughter of Rose, still alive and working less than 2 miles away. At Quincy Public Library, Eleanor approached the reception desk. I'd like to speak with Anne Reynolds, please. Minutes later, a woman of about 60 appeared, with practical gray hair and dark, penetrating eyes. Eyes Eleanor instantly recognized from the 1910 photograph, Rose's eyes. Anne Reynolds' home in a leafy Quincy neighborhood was warm and inviting, with bookshelves covering nearly every available wall and family photographs in frames on all surfaces. An antique piano occupied one corner of the living room, covered with more silver-framed photographs. Eleanor sat on a comfortable sofa, carefully holding the folder containing the restored and protected photograph. I never knew much about Grandma Rose's childhood, Anne explained, serving tea from a floral porcelain set. She talked about Italy sometimes and how her father was a shoemaker. She mentioned a photographer who was kind to her after her mother died, but there always seemed to be pain in those memories. She never mentioned this photograph? Asked Eleanor, opening the folder. Anne looked at the image and gasped. My God, that's her. That's Grandma Rose as a child. And this must be my great-grandmother. It is and isn't, Eleanor explained gently, relating her discovery about the photographic manipulation. Tears filled Anne's eyes. She kept a photograph on her bedside table. As a child, I asked who it was, and she said, It's my mother, whom I never knew, but who has always been with me. I never fully understood what she meant. Anne stood and left the room, returning with an old box. After Grandma died, I inherited some of her things, including this. Inside was a faded photograph of a young woman, alone. On the back, an inscription, Maria DiMatteo, 1909. This is the original photograph used to create the montage, whispered Eleanor. But how did the other photograph end up at the museum? Asked Anne. I was hoping you might know, replied Eleanor. Anne shook her head, confused. I've never seen it before, but I think I know someone who might have answers. She took out her phone and dialed. Uncle Robert, it's Anne. There's someone here you should meet. It's about Grandma Rose's special photograph. Back at the museum the next day, Eleanor examined the box containing the photograph once more. Belonged to Rose. Someone should know her story. Who could have written those words? Marcus entered hurriedly. Eleanor, remember that elderly gentleman who inquired about our immigrant photography exhibition last month? He's back. In the reception area, a man of about 80 waited patiently. Seeing Eleanor, he smiled warmly. Miss Wright, I'm Robert Bellini. Eleanor's heart skipped a beat. Bellini? Like Antonio Bellini? My grandfather, he confirmed. When I heard about your exhibition on immigrant photography, I thought perhaps it was finally time. In the museum cafe, Robert explained, my grandfather maintained contact with Rose throughout his life. She was almost like a daughter to him, especially after her father died. When my grandfather passed away in 1951, he left his photographic archives to our family. Among the items, I found this special photograph of Rose with her mother, his technical masterpiece, as he called it. You're the one who donated the photograph to the museum, concluded Eleanor. Robert nodded. Years ago, I tried to find Rose's descendants but was unsuccessful. Then, when I learned of your exhibition, I thought perhaps if the story was told publicly, someone connected to Rose might come forward. And it worked, smiled Eleanor. I found Rose's granddaughter, Anne. She never saw this version of the photograph, only the original image of her great-grandmother. Robert seemed moved. My grandfather would be pleased. He always said this wasn't merely a photographic manipulation, but an act of love, giving a child the feeling that her mother was still present. Eleanor hesitated before asking, would you be willing to meet Anne? She called me this morning. Her mother, Rose's daughter Maria, kept detailed family records that might add to this story. I would be honored, Robert replied, his eyes brightening. To connect these two families after all this time would be remarkable. 3 months later, Boston Historical Museum was filled for the opening of a new exhibition, Portraits of Hope, The Art and Emotion of Immigrant Photography, 1900-1920. At the center of the exhibition, prominently displayed, was the photograph of Rose with her mother, accompanied by detailed explanatory panels telling the story Eleanor had uncovered. A special interactive display showed the technical process Antonio Bellini had used to create the montage using rudimentary negative overlay techniques, a remarkable feat for the time. Anne Reynolds was there with her family, 3 generations of Rose's descendants. Robert Bellini had brought more photographs and negatives from his grandfather's collection. The two families, connected by a compassionate act a century ago, now moved through the exhibition together, exchanging stories and memories. It's amazing to think that an act of kindness from over 100 years ago is bringing people together today, commented Eleanor as she guided visitors through the exhibition. The exhibition included a technical section explaining how Antonio Bellini had created the montage, as well as the historical context, the difficult life of Italian immigrants in Boston, the 1918 influenza pandemic, the economic conditions that shaped those families. My daughter is named Rose, said Anne, introducing a bright-eyed teenager. And now she knows where her name comes from. Young Rose smiled shyly. It's like we've recovered a piece of our history that was lost. Eleanor observed the gathered generations and thought about how a simple photograph had created a bridge across time, not just preserving memory but telling a story of love, loss, hope, and continuity that spanned more than a century. For Eleanor, what began as a technical mystery had transformed into something much deeper, a testament to the enduring power of family bonds and the human desire to preserve connections even beyond death. 1 year later, Eleanor sat in the basement of Quincy Library, helping Anne organize what had become the Rose Project, an initiative to document immigrant stories through their photographs and personal objects. We've found 10 more families with similar stories, Anne commented, cataloging new donations. Manipulated photographs to reunite families separated by death, distance, or circumstance. Eleanor smiled, gently handling the original photograph of Rose, now officially museum property, but on permanent loan to the library. It's strange to think that what began as a technique to comfort a grieving child ended up preserving an entire family history that might otherwise have been forgotten. The project had grown, attracting national attention. Historians, archivists, and families from around the country sent similar stories and images. A university was developing software to identify other manipulated photographs in historical archives. Rose would have been proud, said Anne. Her story wasn't just about loss, but about how we move forward without forgetting. On the library wall, an enlarged copy of Rose's photograph with her imaginary mother occupied a place of honor. Beside it, a timeline showed 5 generations of the family, reaching to little Maria, Rose's great-great-granddaughter, born 3 months earlier. Robert Bellini had established a scholarship fund for students studying historical photography preservation, named after his grandfather. Antonio always believed photographs weren't just images but vessels of emotion and memory, he explained during the fund's launch. He would be honored to know his work continues to inspire. Sometimes, said Eleanor, watching visitors studying the exhibition, the most important truth isn't what actually happened, but what helps us continue living. Outside the library, snow began falling softly on Boston. A century had passed since a talented photographer created an illusion to dry a child's tears. Now that same illusion, revealed as such, continued to touch lives and connect generations with a power no literal truth could match. Proof that the most enduring legacies are often born from simple acts of compassion.